The rain fell relentlessly over Chicago, casting a gray shadow over the bustling city streets. People rushed by with umbrellas in hand, their hurried pace indifferent to the young woman standing at the corner of Madison Avenue. Sarah Bennett, 23 years old, had grown used to blending into the background of the city's chaos. Her once vibrant dreams of becoming a professional painter, a life filled with color, creativity, and freedom, now felt like distant memories. They were buried under the heavy weight of unpaid bills and the endless worry that consumed her days. Sarah's father, George, a retired factory worker, had been her rock her entire life. But now, his failing health dominated their world. Diagnosed with a severe heart condition, George required constant medical attention that Sarah could barely afford. With hospital bills mounting and her part-time jobs offering little relief, Sarah turned to selling raffle tickets on the street, braving the rain and the cold each day. Clutching a small bundle of tickets in her trembling hands, she forced a smile at passing strangers. Her voice, weary but determined, called out, "Support a good cause! Help fund treatment for the sick!" But most people barely glanced her way. Sarah's resolve was admirable, but the cracks in her spirit were beginning to show. Every night she returned to their small, run-down apartment, exhausted and worried. Yet, she refused to give up, her love for her father fueling her determination. As the rain continued to fall, Sarah could only hope for a miracle, anything to ease the crushing weight of her reality. Little did she know, that miracle was just around the corner. Across town, Mark Evans adjusted his tie as he stepped out of his sleek black car. As the CEO of Evans Design Group, one of Chicago's most prestigious architecture firms, Mark exuded success. His meticulously styled suit and sharp demeanor matched the towering skyline his designs had helped shape. Yet, behind his composed exterior, Mark carried a loneliness he rarely acknowledged, a void left by years of burying himself in work after a personal tragedy. That afternoon, as he drove through the rain-soaked streets, his mind was preoccupied with a major project, but as he stopped at a red light, a figure caught his eye. A young woman, her hair damp from the rain, stood at the corner holding a bundle of raffle tickets. Mark watched as she approached pedestrians with a hopeful smile, only to be brushed aside or ignored entirely. Her determination struck a chord. Despite the rain and the cold, she stood firm, her eyes shining with an unyielding resolve. Without overthinking, Mark rolled down his car window just as she approached. "Raffle tickets?" he asked, his deep voice cutting through the hum of the city. Sarah hesitated, startled by his presence. "Yes, sir. To help fund medical treatment for my father," she replied, her voice trembling with a mix of hope and exhaustion. "How much for all of them?" Mark asked, his tone matter-of-fact. "All of them?" Sarah repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark nodded, handing her a crisp $100 bill before she could protest. He took the tickets and offered a quick, "Good luck," before the light turned green. As his car disappeared into the distance, Sarah stood frozen, clutching the wet bundle of tickets as if afraid they might vanish. The rain mingled with the tears now streaming down her cheeks. For a moment, she felt overwhelmed by gratitude, confusion, and a tiny spark of hope. Who was this man, and why had he chosen to help her? Mark Evans couldn't forget the young woman he had seen at the traffic light. Her determination, despite the rain and cold, lingered in his mind long after he drove away. That evening, as he stared out at the glittering Chicago skyline from his penthouse, he found himself restless. Who was she? What had pushed her to stand on that corner selling raffle tickets? Mark rarely allowed himself to be distracted, but something about her was different. Picking up his phone, he called his assistant, Tom Anderson. "Tom," Mark began, his tone contemplative yet firm, "I need a favor. There's a woman I saw earlier today selling raffle tickets on Madison Avenue. I don't know her name, but I need to find her." Tom hesitated for a moment, surprised by the unusual request. "Do you have any more details, sir?" "She's young, mid-20s maybe, and was standing near the corner by the bus stop." "Look into it discreetly," Mark replied, his voice resolute. By the next morning, Tom had gathered enough information. "Sir, her name is Sarah Bennett, She's a college student taking care of her father, who has a severe heart condition. She sells raffle tickets to pay his medical bills. Mark felt a pang of something he couldn't quite identify. Compassion, admiration, perhaps both. Arrange an interview for her here at Evans Design Group. Make it for a real position, not charity, he instructed. Later that day, Sarah received a call from Tom. We'd like to invite you to interview for an administrative position at Evans Design Group, he said politely. Sarah's heart raced. Me? Are you sure? She asked, her voice wavering. I don't even have experience. There must be a mistake. Someone was impressed by your perseverance, Tom said, avoiding further details. On the day of the interview, Sarah entered the grand building, her nerves building with every step. When she was shown into the meeting room, her heart nearly stopped. Sitting at the head of the table was the man from the traffic light. You? She exclaimed, her voice trembling with disbelief. Mark met her gaze evenly. Yes, I believe you deserve a chance. Sarah Bennett's first day at Evans Design Group felt surreal. She sat at a desk in the administrative office, surrounded by polished professionals in tailored suits. The modern, glass-walled space, bustling with activity, was a far cry from the cold street corners where she had spent her days selling raffle tickets. Mark Evans had offered her an entry-level administrative role, and although the tasks seemed simple, organizing schedules, managing documents, and assisting with daily office duties, Sarah took them seriously. She arrived early, stayed late, and learned everything she could. Despite her nerves, Sarah quickly gained the respect of her colleagues. Her diligence and genuine kindness stood out, and she worked tirelessly to prove herself. Yet, as focused as she was on her new responsibilities, Sarah couldn't ignore the quiet presence of Mark. Mark had always kept a professional distance from his staff, but with Sarah, he found himself breaking his own rules. He would stop by her desk to check on her progress, asking casual questions about her experience. These brief conversations often veered into more personal territory, her father's condition, her struggles, and her dreams. One evening, as the office emptied, Mark lingered, watching Sarah carefully organize the files on her desk. You work harder than most people here, he said, his voice low but warm. Sarah looked up, startled by his sudden comment. I have to, she replied simply. There's too much at stake. Her honesty struck him, and before he could stop himself, he said, I admire that. Not many people would fight as hard as you have. That moment marked a shift in their dynamic. Over time, their conversations deepened. Mark's voice softened as he shared his story. I lost my parents in a car accident when I was 16, he said, pausing to gather his thoughts. It was sudden, cruel, and left me feeling powerless. That's why I've spent my life trying to control everything, to ensure I'd never feel that helpless again. I guess that's why I notice you, Mark admitted one day. You remind me of what it feels like to fight against the odds. Sarah was moved by his vulnerability. She realized that beneath his composed exterior, Mark was a man who understood pain and loss just as deeply as she did. Their shared experiences created a connection neither of them could ignore. For weeks, Sarah Bennett settled into her role at Evans Design Group, growing more confident in her work and finding a rhythm in her new life. Her conversations with Mark Evans became a quiet source of encouragement, and she began to trust the connection forming between them. But the fragile bubble of security Sarah had built was about to burst. One morning as she walked into the office, Sarah felt the weight of eyes on her. Colleagues whispered in hushed tones and exchanged knowing glances as she passed. Confused, she checked her phone during her break and froze at the sight of a headline that made her stomach drop. Chicago's top architect and his mystery woman, Mark Evans' surprising connection to a raffle ticket seller. The article was relentless, exposing her humble background and her connection to Mark. It painted her as a desperate opportunist climbing the social ladder, using every stereotype imaginable. The accompanying photos, snapped without her knowledge, showed her and Mark in seemingly intimate moments, like a candid shot of them talking by her desk. Sarah's hands trembled as she read the cruel words. She felt stripped bare, her privacy violated, her integrity questioned. She barely made it through the rest of the day, dodging the stares of her coworkers and suppressing the tears threatening to spill. That evening, her phone buzzed. It was Mark. "Have you seen it?" he asked, his voice calm but tinged with anger. "Yes," Sarah whispered, her voice cracking. "How did this happen?" "I don't know yet, but I'll find out," Mark assured her. "We'll handle this, I promise." "Mark, this is too much," she said, her frustration spilling over. "I didn't ask for any of this. People judging me, calling me names. I don't belong in this world." "You belong where you choose to be," Mark replied firmly. "And if that's here, I'll do everything in my power to protect you." Despite his confidence, Sarah felt a growing sense of dread. The stares, the whispers, the intrusion. It was all too overwhelming. The following days were relentless. Paparazzi camped outside her apartment, journalists called incessantly, and the gossip among her colleagues intensified. Sarah began to question if she could endure the pressure. The line between her private life and the public spectacle blurred, and she wondered if her connection to Mark was worth the cost of losing herself. The days that followed were a blur for Sarah. The relentless media attention had taken its toll, and her father's health was rapidly declining. George's heart condition worsened, and despite Sarah's best efforts and the medical care he received, it became clear that his time was running out. One quiet morning, Sarah sat by her father's bedside in the dimly lit hospital room. The rhythmic beeping of the monitors was the only sound breaking the heavy silence. George opened his eyes, his gaze softening as he looked at his daughter. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice frail but affectionate. "You've been so strong. Your mother would be proud." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. "Dad, please don't talk like that. You're going to get better." He gave a gentle shake of his head. "We both know that's not true, and that's okay. I've made peace with it." He reached out, his hand trembling as he placed it over hers. "I need you to promise me something." "Anything," Sarah replied, her voice breaking. "Don't let the world harden you," he whispered, his hand trembling in hers. "You have something special, Sarah. Your heart. Keep that kindness alive, no matter how tough things get. Promise me. You'll let yourself be happy. Don't lose sight of that." Sarah nodded, unable to speak. She stayed with him as his breaths grew shallow, cherishing the final moments they had together. As dawn broke, George passed away peacefully, leaving Sarah enveloped in a profound sense of loss. The funeral was a modest affair. Sarah stood alone, the weight of solitude heavier than ever. As the last of the attendees offered their condolences and departed, she felt a familiar presence beside her. Mark approached quietly, his expression solemn. "I'm so sorry for your loss," he said softly. "I didn't expect to see you here," Sarah admitted, wiping away a stray tear. "I wanted to be here for you," Mark replied. "You shouldn't have to go through this alone." Unbeknownst to her, Mark had taken care of the funeral expenses and arrangements, ensuring everything proceeded smoothly. His discreet support touched Sarah deeply. Over the following days, Mark continued to be a steady presence. He didn't press her to talk or make decisions. He was simply there, providing quiet comfort. One evening, as they sat together overlooking the city lights, Sarah broke the silence. "You've done so much for me," she began. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to thank me," Mark said gently. "I care about you, Sarah, more than you might realize." She turned to face him, the vulnerability in her eyes met by the sincerity in his. "I've been so afraid," she confessed. "Afraid of the media, of what people think, of letting someone in. But losing my dad, it's made me see what's truly important." Mark reached out, taking her hand in his. "You don't have to be afraid anymore. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." In that moment, Sarah saw Mark not as the powerful CEO or the man shrouded in mystery, but as someone who genuinely understood her pain and wanted to share her burdens. The walls she'd built began to crumble, and she allowed herself to consider a future where she didn't have to stand alone. In the days following her father's funeral, Sarah returned to Evan's design group, carrying the weight of grief, but also a renewed sense of determination. The office, once an intimidating place, now felt like a sanctuary, somewhere she could focus and rebuild. Mark Evans, though careful to maintain professionalism, found ways to support Sarah without overstepping. He arranged flexible hours, ensured she wasn't overwhelmed, and occasionally left small notes of encouragement on her desk. It was his way of being there without pressuring her. One evening, as they walked out of the office together, Mark paused before they reached the building's exit. "Sarah," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "there's something I need to say." She turned to face him, sensing the gravity of his words. "I know we come from different worlds," he admitted. "And I know this hasn't been easy. For either of us. But from the moment I saw you, I knew there was something extraordinary about you. Your strength, your resilience. It's inspired me in ways I can't explain." Sarah looked at him, her heart pounding. "Mark, I don't know if I belong in your world," she confessed. "It's overwhelming, and sometimes I feel like I'm drowning in everything that comes with it." "You don't have to belong to my world," Mark said, stepping closer. "We can create a new one, together. One where we face everything as equals, as partners. I care about you, Sarah. Not because I pity you, but because I admire you." For the first time, Sarah allowed herself to believe in the possibility of happiness. Sarah took a deep breath, the weight of the past months pressing down on her. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But maybe it's time I let myself believe in something good. I want to try." Mark smiled, the tension in his face softening. "That's all I ask." As they walked out into the cool Chicago night, hand in hand, Sarah felt the weight of her past begin to lift. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, she felt hope. Hope for a future filled with strength, love, and new beginnings.